And the first one is case histories. I need to take a breath. I need to slow down. This is not a marathon. Or this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. Idiot. Or I just, you know, yeah. Why are there always noises from outside? Hi everyone, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be another tag video, and this is a Choose Your Year tag, which was an original tag created by Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures. And unlike other tags that I have done in the past, I actually was tagged in this video, so thank you again, Mel, for tagging me. I'm excited to do it. I'm including her link down below so you guys can watch her video. And basically, this is straightforward. You choose a year. I will choose my year in a moment, and you have to answer a handful of book questions with books that were published in the year that you pick. So I picked a year without looking ahead at what the books were, and then of course I was like, crap, maybe I should have picked a different year, but this was a fun one. I enjoyed it, and let's just get on with it. So question number one is to choose your year and explain why you picked it. And I hemmed and hawed a lot about this one. And I decided to go with 2004, and that is the year that I moved back to New York City from Boston. It was a huge decision for me. It was not completely expected by, I think, a lot of people in my life, family included. I had gone to school in Boston. My original game plan was always to go to school 4 years back to New York, because this is where I'm from originally. And I wound up really enjoying Boston. So I didn't come back right away. And when I did, it was not something I had talked about a lot with people. It was kind of a conclusion I got to pretty privately, without getting into too much stuff. I just wasn't happy. Couldn't quite figure out why, couldn't quite figure out how to fix it. And I understand when people say they have an aha moment, because I literally had an aha moment where I was like, I could leave. Maybe that would make me happy. And I didn't have to force myself to stay where I was. I had options, and it kind of hadn't occurred to me, which sounds so silly in hindsight. But once I had sort of had that aha moment and I started to kind of go about making the decision and then talk to people about it. So it was a huge decision. It was a huge life change. I kind of did it with not a huge plan in place at the time, a lot of unknowns. It all obviously worked out well because here I am, but it was a really pivotal decision for me to walk away from the life that I had built in Boston and also to come back here. Just like I say, with not a lot of plan in place and not a lot of strategy to it, but it all worked out. So 2004 is the year that I picked. So question number two is, which books have you read from that year? And before I jump into it, I did want to note, because Mel has also done this on her video, you can actually just go onto Goodreads and find books, like an entire list of books that came out in whatever year that you choose, or you can obviously just Google it. I wound up doing both because I first did the Goodreads option and I thought they must be missing books, as if Goodreads missed books that came out in 2004, but it turns out they didn't. But this was a time where I actually really was reading a good amount of books, and I was surprised to see that there weren't more books that came out in that year that I was reading. So obviously, I wasn't reading a lot of new releases at the time, other than kind of some of my go-to authors. So the first book I read is Something Borrowed by Emily Giffin, and I didn't actually read it in 2004, and I have talked about her on this channel before. I did a whole dedicated video, which I'll link for you guys, but I discovered Emily Giffin kind of right before her third book came out, and this is her first. And this is very much, and I noticed this on the list, this is very much in the vein of chick lit. This is a lot of what was coming out at the time. This is about sort of these two best friends and sort of the guy, not so much in between them, but the guy who causes sort of a rift in their friendship. And I loved it. It takes place in New York. It was just warm and fuzzy for me. I was rooting for these characters. I really enjoyed these characters. it made me fall in love with Emily Giffen as an author. So I completely recommend it. I still read this with fondness. I look back on this book with fondness. So good read. Another book which I don't have anymore is Little Earthquakes by Jennifer Weiner. And this book, I actually didn't remember what it was about, so I had to go look it up, but it was marked as read on my Goodreads. And then when I read the synopsis, I remembered why. So I'm a big fan of Jennifer Weiner's books. Good in Bed, In Her Shoes, Goodnight Nobody. Like, I was a huge fan of hers. This obviously was a book that I bought, I'm guessing at the time, although I shouldn't even say, but I know that I read it. And this is sort of where her stories started to change, which again, authors grow and change and their stories grow along with it. And this was a book about 3 women who were moms for the first time and sort of the challenges of motherhood, what they were going through. This was not something I could relate to. So this is a book I have on hold because I checked, and I still probably have 7 or 8 Jennifer Weiner books, and this is not one of them. So I think it's not that it wasn't a good book, it just wasn't something I connected with, and definitely was something I knew I wasn't going to read again, but totally love her as an author. Another book that I read is Patricia Cornwell's Trace. I feel like this is going to cause major glare because it's a metallic cover. This is her Case Scarpetta series, which I have also talked about on here before. This is the 13th book in the series. I'll be honest, I don't 100% remember the storyline of this, but the pages are dog-eared. I definitely read it. I did stop reading the series, even though I kept buying it. And I've talked about this before too. One of my missions is to reread this series from the beginning, and her first book is on my reread list for this year. So I did read Trace. I would bet the farm that I actually bought this in 2004 because she was an auto-buy author for me. So yes, bought it, read it, here it is. The next book I read is Bergdorf Blondes by Plume Sykes, and this was, again, sort of in that sort of chick lit, New York City, a lot of people with money, fashion industry, shopping, all of this kind of stuff vein. And I also distinctly remember this one, did not like it, unhauled it. This was very kind of shallow, vapid kind of book about the time and about the city. And I think about when Devil Wears Prada came out and Lauren Weisberger's books, and it was in Manhattan, people in the fashion industry, people in publishing, people in the social scene. And I just connected more with those books. This book, Bergdorf Blondes, was kind of empty for me. Was not a fan, didn't like the writing, didn't like any of it. So that was a no-go. And the last book on the list that I have is my favorite, Marian Keyes. Love her as an author. And this is The Other Side of the Story. And this is a book about 3 different women, although oddly, there's only one on the cover, and how they are connected. They work in the publishing industry in, I don't know if it's London or Ireland. Isn't that horrible? Because Marian Keyes is Irish, but a lot of her books happen in London, and it doesn't even say. Doesn't matter. Anyway, somewhere that's not in the US. But it's how these 3 women are connected, and the idea is that, the other side of the story is everyone has their own version of the exact same thing that happened, and you get to see the story through all the different ladies' perspectives. And again, I just love Marian Keyes to death. I think she's just smart and funny and witty, and she will hurt my heart and she will warm my heart, and she's just such a good author. It's funny when I was looking at these books and feeling reminiscent again, I definitely want to read this one again because I haven't read it in a long time and I don't remember the details of it as well as I remember some of her other books. But absolutely love her, and yeah, so Other Side of the Story. Question number 3 are, what are some books that you want to read from 2004? And I, again, was really surprised to see the books that had come out in this year, and thought there would be more that I was familiar with, and also was surprised to see a few books that I shouldn't say that I've always had a curiosity about, but these are authors that I would say I have discovered since then. So these are obviously older books in their repertoire. But the first one is Case Histories by Kate Atkinson. And she is an author I continue to hear about. She's an author I've heard about a lot in the past. And I can't even tell you why I never picked up her books, but I just haven't. But Case Histories is one of those books that I feel constantly comes up about her. And there's some sort of mystery thriller aspect to it. I probably should have looked into it more. I don't know the whole story, but that is one that I definitely want to pick up. I need to look down. Tess Gerritsen's Rizzoli and Isles book, Body Double. came out in 2004. This is actually the fourth book in her series, but Rizzoli and Isles was always a series I was curious about picking up. And it's funny, somebody had just mentioned this in one of the comments on one of the videos I did recently also. So I have watched maybe the first 2 seasons of the TV show when it was on, but it's kind of one that I was like curious about, but again, for no good reason, just never dove into it. But I kind of have like Tess Gerritsen, you know, hanging out on my list of authors I want to dive into. And then Harlan Coben had a book, Just One Look, that came out. And he is another author that I enjoy. I have sporadically read his books. I have seen him at conferences. I've seen him do keynote speeches. He's hysterical. I very much enjoy his books, his mysteries, his thrillers. Like, they're definitely fast-paced, and they're kind of like a little grittier, a little darker, but you're like down the rabbit hole with him, and they go like really quick, and they're good stories. So this is one that I'm kind of, you know, flagging on the list. And then James Patterson's Third Degree, which is the third in the Women's Murder Club series. It came out in 2004. And this is another series that I was always curious about, but again, didn't pick up. And I don't know if anybody remembers, because it was like blink and you miss it, that Women's Murder Club was a TV show. I don't even know if they made like 6 episodes or something. Like, I don't understand why it didn't get picked up, because it was so good. Angie Harmon was the lead in it. Ironically, then went on for Rizzoli and Isles. But it's these 4 women. So like, she was a detective. I want to say one's a medical examiner, one's a journalist, and one is either like the DA or works in the DA's office or something like that. And they're all friends, but they come together to obviously like solve crimes. So, you know, I feel like I got very far away from James Patterson, but I used to read his earlier books, and I feel like, yeah, I mean, now he's churning out like 5 a year, so who can even keep up with him? But I very much enjoyed his earlier writing. So again, this is another one that's on my list as something that I want to give a go to. So I was surprised / happy to see these authors pop up in 2004. The next question was to pick an obscure book from the year, and I went through a lot of different lists about this, and I was surprised, and these are not the obscure books, but I was surprised how many books there were about 9/11 and terrorism, and it was like a very political heavy list in 2004. There was a Bill Clinton book that came out, and obviously I understand kind of, you know, when I remember what the world was like then. I think I was just more surprised that these books weren't like 2002, 2003 books that had come out, but obviously there was so much still coming out about terrorism, and the world was, you know, not that it was a different place, but it was a different time, and I understand how things were heightened then, but I was surprised how like political heavy all the book lists that I had looked at were. But the most random one I came up with, which is nothing political at all, is called The Rocklopedia Fake Bandica by T. Mike Childs. And this is literally a book that catalogs fake bands that were in movies and TV shows, which, like, do we need to know this? But it has like Spinal Tap and the Chipmunks and the Blues Brothers and things in it. So I thought it was completely random. I don't know why we need an entire book on this. More power to him for writing a book, because who am I to say? But yeah, I felt that that was pretty random. And question number 5 was to find a strange book cover. And I struggled with this one because I feel like so many of the books, like I said, there was sort of like a political component to the list that year, and all that stuff was just sort of obvious, or like Bill Clinton's face was on it, or it was just the words of the title of the book, or like American flags and things. And then there were some chick lit books which were like the cover absolutely represented what the book was, and there was like a lot of fantasy stuff, which to me it's like, I don't know, I'm not a fantasy reader, so like all that stuff just sort of is, but I felt like the books were like fairly literal to what the title was, or fairly literal to what the subject matter was. So the only one that I came up with, and I don't even think this is like that impressive of a find, is called Truth and Beauty by Anne Patchett. And like, I don't understand like why there's an egg on the cover. So I don't know what an egg has to do with truth and beauty. I didn't even look to see what this book was about, so maybe I should have actually done that, and maybe then the egg would have made sense. I was thinking like, what comes first, the chicken and the egg? But there's just an egg, so I don't know what comes first, truth or beauty. Is it an obscure book about beauty where you have to put egg yolk on your face? Do eggs give you better skin? Like, I have absolutely no idea. So I don't get it. I don't know if it's a book about fertility, which now I'm talking about eggs. Maybe there's some connection there. No clue. But when I was like reading titles and looking at covers and like, makes sense, I get it. And then I looked at this one and I was kind of like, what? So yeah, that was my pick. So those are the answers to my questions. Thank you again, Mel, for tagging me in this video. It was really fun. And it's kind of like, now I almost want to go back to like different pivotal times in my life and see like what happened like the year I graduated high school or what happened like the year I graduated college, and kind of see what other books are on there to get some new inspirations for other things to read. But this was definitely a fun like trip down memory lane, and I would say if anybody else is game for doing it, please do it. Let me know. Come back and like link your video, or let me know in the comments if you posted a video on this so I can check out your year and your picks. And yeah, have fun with it because it was definitely a fun tag. So thank you to everyone for hanging out today and watching. Thanks again to Mel, and I will see you guys all next time around. Bye, everybody.